All right. So when I was growing up, we used to vacation on the southern Gulf Coast of Florida. And my aunt and uncle had a condo in a little town called Bonita Springs. My parents liked it so much that they bought a condo there in the same building on the second floor. This was a great place to vacation, and our balcony looked right out onto the beach. And so if I was floating a little far out, my mom could just get out on the balcony and be like, "Come back in," or "It's lunchtime." You know, everybody knew it was our mom. Or you'd be floating on the raft. "Don't get off the raft. There's stingrays swimming under you." But the water was that clear, though. You could see to the bottom. You could see sand dollars and king conchs, and it was wonderful. It was so great for shelling. Now, as the mother of 4 kids, my mom would often take off down the beach by herself shelling. I think it was probably more of a way to get away from us than it was to go shelling, but we'd watch her go, and she'd stoop down and pick up a shell, rinse it off, and either pocket it or throw it back. She was an expert. She could find anything, and she did pretty much find every shell you could possibly imagine. Now, as we grew older, she would invite us to come along. I thought I was being smart, and if I got ahead of my mom, then I would find the good stuff before she did. Yeah, no. She had the eye. I didn't have the eye. I learned from walking with her or behind her. And she'd pick up something and show me and tell me what it was, and I'd pick up something and run to her and ask what it was, and I got the best shell education you could ever imagine. Well, the years went by, and I became a moody teenager, and I started going on the shelling walks by myself. More to find boys than shells. I still would come back with some shells, and Mom and I would identify them or look them up in the shell book if we didn't know what they were. Now, since my mom had found everything, or so she thought, a neighbor opened her eyes to this shell called a sea fan. Now, a sea fan was like a scallop shell, but like perfectly flat instead of having that concave part. And because they were flat, they would break easily. They were pretty fragile. And this became my mother's holy grail of shells. Whenever we went out, she'd be like, "Look for a sea fan." I thought they were so boring. I'm like, ugh, no. But I would look for one. I never found a whole one. And I think in the time my mom spent shelling, she maybe only found 3 or 4 sea fans. And mostly they would have a little chip here, just they weren't perfect. So in 2018, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And she felt okay. She was a little tired. She was extremely proud of herself because she'd lost a lot of weight. Go figure. She could wear a size 0 Chico's jean now. But as time went by, she didn't feel so great. And all 4 of us went to visit her and spend time with her as much as we could. And then as the months went by, we were there more often because she was going downhill. My brother was with her when my sister came to pick me up from the airport in Atlanta. And on the way back from the airport, we were talking about how Mom seemed to be lingering, and it just seemed like it was time for her to go. And I joked that my dad, who had passed in 2015, was standing there going, "Okay, Winnell, it's time to go. You're going to make me late. Come on, get going, get going." And we laughed about that because Dad was always trying to rush Mom along because she was making him late for parties and whatnot. It wasn't 5 minutes after we were laughing about that when my brother called to say my mom had passed. I hadn't even made it to say goodbye. Well, when we all gathered for her memorial service, all 4 siblings, we saw the evidence of her love of Naples and Bonita Springs. She had a lamp filled with her favorite shells. She had a shell mirror that I had made for her of scallop shells. She had a bowl that had all her favorites, including her 3 or 4 almost perfect sea fans. And we all took what we wanted to remember her. Along with those treasures, my sisters and I inherited a timeshare. And we hoped, and I think Mom hoped, that we would all vacation together. We hadn't for a long time. In fact, my sisters didn't get along for a long time, so I don't think they would have ever chosen to vacation together if you'd asked. But as we got older, we realized the value of family. And this past April, we booked a trip to Marco Island, Florida, which is south of Naples, and I was stoked. It had good shelling, so I was like, yes. So we got there, and as soon as we got all settled in our condo, we hauled butt down to the beach. We're looking around and not seeing much of anything. And I was like, damn, where are all the shells? My one sister, Suzanne, would find a live conch. You know, the little animal comes out. Oh, it's gross. But you can't take those anymore. It's against the law, so she put it back in the water. My oldest sister, Lori, headed down the beach a different way to look for scallop shells that were grays and blacks, because that's the kind of person she is. I'm more of the pinks and oranges kind of scallop shell person. But when we went back up to the condo, what is going on? Why didn't we find any good shells? And Lori said, well, you know what? We should have asked Mom for help. I'm like, oh, yeah, that would have been great if Mom had been with us. You know, we could have found these great shells. So the next morning, Suzanne and I went down at low tide to go shelling. And I said, wait, we got to ask Mom. So we both looked skyward and said, okay, Mom, we're going shelling. Come with us. Help us find the good stuff. So we walked along, and it wasn't long before Suzanne found an empty conch. And then I found a good shell and another good shell. And it just kept happening until our pockets were so full of wonderful shells, we had to turn around and go back to the condo to unload. And my sister Laurie laughed. She thought that was great. So all week, before we went out shelling, hey, Mom, we're going out now. Come with us. All week, we came back with full pockets. It was amazing. The last day we were there, I went out for a long, long walk. I got to the point where the condos are way far away from the water, and there's beautiful white sand beaches, and there's not a lot of waves. It's kind of calm there, and there were a few other shellers, and I felt like, wow, I feel like if I just looked around, Mom would be there. I felt like she was there with me, and I kept finding the shells. Every shell that she had ever taught me about, I found. And if it had an animal in it, I'd take a picture and put it back. So, with my pockets full, I turned around and headed back to the condo. By this time, people were coming out on the beach. The joggers were out, and there's a layer of crushed shells where the waves sort of wash them up, and the joggers run on those, and the people with bare feet are in the nice warm water where it's soft. And that's kind of like where I like to look, because I could look in the water for the shells, or I could look at the crushed stuff. I'm dodging kids making sand castles. I'm dodging the people who have their sand chairs in the water. And I look down and I see it. I did a double take. What? I scooped it up, not believing it. My heart was racing. I rinsed it off. I found a sea fan. A sea fan was sitting on this pile of shells where the joggers ran. It could have been crushed under somebody's foot at any minute. It was this big around. It was huge. It was untouched, unbroken. It was perfect. Tears started welling up in my eyes. Mom was with me. I knew Mom was with me. I thanked her. And then I headed back down the beach, feeling like I'm still shelling with my mom. Thanks.